The first thing Mira Calder noticed was that no one looked at her until something went missing. For most of the evening, she had moved through Greyhaven's Winter Hall as servants were meant to move quietly, efficiently, close enough to refill a cup before it emptied, and forgettable enough that no ranked wolf needed to wonder who had done it. Snow pressed white against the tall windows. Firelight shivered along the carved beams. At the raised tables, alphas and council families drank spiced wine beneath banners stitched with old victories. Mira kept her eyes down and her tray level. She had learned long ago that invisibility could be useful. At Greyhaven, a servant who drew attention usually discovered that attention came with an order, a correction, or blame. Then Lord Harrow's silver military seal disappeared. The accusation moved faster than reason. One moment, Mira was replacing a goblet beside the western table. The next, a guard caught her by the elbow while another servant searched the floor. Conversation thinned. Chairs scraped. Lord Harrow swore the seal had been beside his hand moments earlier. "Search her," Lady Celine Harrow said. The guard hesitated. "My lady?" She was the last servant here. Mira set the tray down herself. "You won't find it on me." Lady Celine's mouth barely moved. "Then you have nothing to fear." Mira stood still while a female attendant searched the pockets of her gray apron. The first held a folded cloth. The second, 2 spare candle wicks. From the third came a flash of silver. The attendant drew out Lord Harrow's seal. Mira stared at it. "I didn't put that there." Lord Harrow rose. "Of course you didn't." A few people smiled. Mira had crossed that side of the hall 3 times in the past quarter hour. Anyone could have brushed against her. A servant's apron pocket hung open by design. She tried to remember every shoulder, every hand, every body that had passed too close, but the hall had been crowded. Unranked servants did not accuse ranked guests without standing, and everyone in Greyhaven knew it. The Greyhaven Alpha stepped down from the central dais. Kneel. Mira did not move. A murmur passed through the hall. His gaze hardened. "You know the law." She did. That was the worst of it. Mira lowered herself onto one knee, then the other. Stone pressed through the thin wool of her dress. Heat climbed her throat, but she kept her back straight. Someone near the eastern table murmured, "A servant dressed clean is still a servant." Soft laughter followed. Mira fixed her eyes on the iron ring set into the floor between her knees. She would not give them tears. "Not here. Mira." That voice hurt more than the laughter. She turned. Evan Mercer stood 3 tables away in a dark formal coat, his blonde hair combed back, his father beside him. For months, Evan had found reasons to linger near the kitchens. He had walked with Mira through the herb courtyard, brought her sugared pears, once told her Greyhaven felt less cold when she was in it. Now he looked as if he wished he were anywhere else. Lord Harrow followed Mira's gaze. "You know the girl?" Evan went still. Mira did not ask him to save her. She only looked at him. "Well enough to speak for her character?" Lord Harrow asked. A pause. Then Evan said, "No, my lord." Something inside Mira became very quiet. "I barely know her." She looked away. Across the hall, another man had not. Alpha King Dorian Vane stood near the high table, dressed in black without crown or ceremonial armor. He did not need either. The room kept an invisible distance around him. Dark hair framed a face made severe by restraint, and amber gold eyes rested on Mira with unsettling attention. For one dangerous second, hope rose. A strange awareness stirred beneath her ribs, then vanished. Mira blamed fear. He had seen the search. He had heard Evan. He had watched them make her kneel. Dorian turned to the Greyhaven Alpha. "There is no witness to the theft? None is required for household discipline. This is Greyhaven's internal matter, Your Majesty." Silence held. Mira watched Dorian. He could intervene. Everyone knew it. Instead, after one measured breath, he said, "Proceed according to your law." Hope died so cleanly it almost felt like relief. Whatever happened next, she would not mistake the king's attention for protection again. The Greyhaven Alpha ordered her servant insignia removed. A guard reached for the pewter badge pinned at Mira's shoulder. Then Lord Harrow's seal passed through the torchlight. Mira saw the back, a narrow crescent. 3 vertical cuts beneath it. The hall vanished. For a heartbeat, she smelled smoke instead of wine, wet wool instead of cedar. A child screamed somewhere beyond a burning wall. Bells hammered through the dark at Red Hollow. Her body went cold. "Stop." The guard froze. Mira rose before anyone gave permission. Gasps broke around the hall. The Greyhaven Alpha's face darkened. "Kneel." Mira barely heard him. Her eyes were on Dorian. "Your Majesty?" The title came out sharper than she intended. Dorian's expression changed by a fraction. But he was listening. Mira pointed at the seal. "Where did that come from?" Lord Harrow scoffed. "You are in no position to ask." "Because I have seen that mark before." The room fell silent. Dorian stepped away from the high table. "Where?" Mira's fingers trembled. She closed them into a fist. "Red Hollow." Something flickered across Dorian's face. "When?" "The night before it burned." No one laughed now. Dorian's voice lowered. "How old were you?" 12. The old bells seemed to ring again inside her skull. Mira looked at the silver mark in Lord Harrow's hand. Everyone who ignored it was dead by morning. The hall never fully recovered after Mira spoke. Conversation returned in fragments, quieter than before. Lord Harrow's silver seal was placed under guard on a side table, and the Greyhaven Alpha ordered that no one touch it until it could be examined in daylight. No one apologized to Mira. No one asked who might have slipped it into her apron. Within 10 minutes, Greyhaven decided what to do with the inconvenience she had become. She was dismissed before midnight. The steward met her outside the servants' wing with a folded cloak, the wages still owed to her, and no expression at all. "You may remain until dawn." Mira took the purse. "Generous. Your household badge has been revoked." I noticed. In her narrow room, she packed everything she owned into one cloth bag. 2 dresses, a comb, a bone-handled kitchen knife, and a faded strip of red cloth she had carried since Red Hollow. She was tying the bag closed when someone knocked. Alpha King Dorian Vane stood outside. Rowan waited several paces behind him near the stairwell, far enough away to give the meeting privacy without pretending the king had come alone. Mira did not bow, Dorian noticed. "Greyhaven dismissed you. They work quickly when embarrassment is involved." His gaze dropped to the packed bag. "I have a position available at Castle Vane." Mira stared at him. "You are offering me work." "Yes." "Because you feel guilty?" "No." The answer was immediate. "Then why?" "You recognized a military mark no one else in that hall recognized." "I recognized something that killed people." "Exactly." Mira folded her arms. "So this is not really about needing a maid." "It is. The upper household has an opening. And the rest? I want to know why that mark has appeared again. At least that is honest. I prefer honesty when I can afford it." That almost sounded like a joke. Mira did not reward it. Instead, she stepped into the corridor and closed the door behind her. "Why should I work for a king who stood there while they made me kneel?" Rowan's gaze shifted toward the window. Dorian stayed on her. "I believed Greyhaven had the right to resolve an internal household matter under its own law." "You believed jurisdiction mattered." "Yes." "Did it?" A pause. "At the time, I believed it did." "And now?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Now I am less certain." Mira studied him. He did not tell her his hands had been tied. He did not blame politics or Greyhaven or the law itself. That made him harder to dismiss. You could have stopped it. Yes. And you chose not to. Yes. The answer hurt less than an excuse would have, which irritated her. What exactly are you asking from me? Dorian's tone became more precise. You have two choices. You may accept employment in my household and have nothing to do with the inquiry. I will not compel your involvement. And the second, you assist when the mark, Red Hollow, or anything clearly connected to them becomes relevant. In return, I give you access to the material necessary for you to identify what you know. How much access? As much as I can lawfully give you. There it was. The boundary. He was offering her a voice, but not unlimited reach. Trust, but measured. Mira did not like the limit. She liked even less that he stated it before she agreed. Still, it was a choice. Greyhaven had spent years teaching her that choices belong to people with rank. Dorian, for reasons she did not yet trust, had placed one in her hands. Mira looked back at the bag on her bed. Greyhaven had already decided what she was worth. She was finished letting Greyhaven make decisions for her. I'll help with the mark. Dorian nodded once. And the position? I assume your castle still needs someone to clean rooms. The corner of his mouth shifted. It does. Then I accept both. They left Greyhaven at first light. Dorian did not ride beside her or attempt another conversation on the road. Mira was grateful for that. She needed distance from Greyhaven, from Evan's refusal, and from the king's admission that he had watched because he believed the rules required him to. None of those things had settled inside her yet. Castle Vane emerged from the northern forest by late afternoon, dark stone rising above black pines. Mira was given a small room in the servants' wing, a new pewter household badge, and instructions to report for upper household duty the next morning. She pinned the badge to her shoulder without ceremony. A new household did not mean a new kind of power. She intended to remember that. That night, she slept badly. Sometime after midnight, thirst drove her into the nearly dark servants' corridor. She had just reached the stairwell with a cup in her hand when a bell sounded somewhere deep inside the castle. Once, then again, silence. One final strike. Mira stopped breathing. Two bells. Pause. One. The cup slipped from her fingers and shattered against the stone. No. Then she ran. The broken cup was still spinning across the stone when Mira reached the end of the servants' corridor. She did not stop to put on shoes. Cold bit through her stockings as she ran down the back stairs, one hand skimming the wall for balance. Two bells, a pause, one. She had not heard that sequence in 12 years, but her body remembered it before her mind could argue. Gate compromised. At Red Hollow, the signal had come less than an hour before the eastern entrance failed. Mira burst into the lower passage and nearly collided with a guard. "Western Gate," she said. He caught her shoulders. "What?" "Get to the Western Gate." The guard frowned at her nightdress beneath her cloak. "Go back to your quarters." Mira tore free. "If I'm wrong, you lose 5 minutes. If I'm right, you lose the castle." Another voice cut through the passage. "What happened?" Dorian descended the stair behind 2 royal guards, fully dressed except for his cloak. Rowan followed close behind. Mira turned on him. "The Western Gate. Now." Dorian did not ask why. They crossed the courtyard at a run. Frost silvered the stones. The Western Gate tower rose black against the moonlit wall, 2 sentries already looking down in confusion as Rowan called for the mechanism room to be opened. Inside, iron gears and chains filled a narrow chamber smelling of oil and cold metal. Mira went straight to the lower support housing. She dropped to her knees. "Lantern." A guard handed one over. The main locking pin looked intact from above. Mira leaned closer. "There." A thin cut ran almost completely around the base where the metal disappeared into its housing. Rowan crouched beside her and touched the groove. It's nearly through. Dorian looked from the pin to Mira. If the gate took a hard impact, the pin would shear, Rowan said. The lower brace would fail. And the gate? Mira answered first. Would open far enough for men to force it. Silence settled over the chamber. Dorian's gaze fixed on her. How did you know where to look? Mira stared at the cut metal. For one heartbeat, she saw another gate, another winter, another pair of hands pulling her into a cellar while bells hammered above screams. Because they did it before every breach in the north. By sunrise, the western gate had been closed to traffic, the damaged pin removed, and every other gate mechanism placed under inspection. Mira expected to be sent back to her duties. Instead, a guard found her outside the upper kitchens. The king requests you in the security chamber. Requests, she noticed, not orders. The chamber was smaller than the great hall, but less forgiving. Maps covered the central table. Rowan stood at Dorian's right. 6 ranked wolves occupied the remaining seats, all turning when Mira entered in her plain gray servant dress. One man's brows rose. This is the maid? Dorian did not look at him. Mira Calder is here as a crown witness. The room changed by a fraction. Not acceptance. Recognition of a rule. Dorian motioned toward the table. Tell them what you told us at the gate. Mira approached. The bell sequence meant a compromised gate during the Hollow War. The cut on the support pin was deliberate. A broad-shouldered lord leaned back. You were 12. Yes. And we are expected to restructure castle security based on what a frightened child remembers? Mira looked directly at him. No. You should restructure it based on the pin someone almost cut through last night. The lord's face tightened. The method could be coincidence. It could. Mira stepped closer to the map. But whoever did it knew where the brace would fail without being visible during a normal inspection. That is not someone damaging a gate. That is someone preparing it. For what? A breach. The First Lord interrupted. Or perhaps, she has the floor. Dorian's voice was quiet. The interruption stopped. Mira looked at him. At Greyhaven, he had stood aside while law reduced her to silence. Here, he had not answered for her. He had made the room listen. It did not erase Greyhaven, but it changed the weight of his attention. For the first time, she wondered whether he could learn from a failure instead of merely regret it. Mira turned back to the table. If someone wanted the gate open immediately, they would have finished cutting the pin. They did not. They left it weak enough to fail later. Rowan's attention sharpened. Under pressure. Yes. So this was preparation. Mira nodded. No one laughed. The meeting continued around her after that. Not comfortably, and not as if rank had ceased to matter, but when someone asked what she remembered, they waited for the answer. For the first time in years, Mira left a room full of ranked wolves, without feeling that she had survived it by disappearing. She was nearly at the door when Rowan unrolled a smaller supply map. Before we adjourn, tomorrow's grain convoy enters from the southern road and cuts through Westmere Pass. Mira stopped. Her eyes returned to the table. A black line crossed the mountains, narrow between 2 ridges before descending toward the river. Something in her stomach tightened. She stepped back to the map. Don't send anyone through there. Dorian looked at the black line, then at Mira. This time, no one told her to be quiet. The convoy did not take Westmere Pass. Dorian changed the route before dawn, but he did not cancel the delivery. Rowan sent 6 scouts through the pass without wagons, moving high along the ridge where they could watch the road unseen. Mira learned the result just after midday. She was polishing a mirror frame in the upper corridor when Rowan appeared, still wearing his riding gloves. Come with me. The security chamber was already occupied. Dorian stood over the central table. Mud streaked the boots of two scouts near the hearth. One scout placed three objects on the map: a broken arrow shaft, black cord, and a small iron spike. "We found firing positions on both ridges," he said. "Freshly cut brush. Footprints covered with pine needles. At least 12 men." Rowan pointed to a narrow section of road. "And here?" "Ground disturbed along the shoulder. Enough for a wagon wheel to drop if it took the turn too fast." Mira looked at Westmere Pass. On paper, it looked harmless. "How long had they been there?" Dorian asked. "Less than a day." The room went quiet. Someone had known the convoy schedule. Someone had expected the grain wagons on that road. Mira looked at Dorian. "So now you believe me." "I believed you enough to redirect the convoy." "That is not what I asked." His expression barely shifted, but the other men suddenly found the map more interesting. Dorian dismissed everyone except Rowan and Mira. When the door closed, Mira stepped closer. "The gate. The bells. Now this. Someone inside your command is preparing attacks." "I know." "Then arrest the people who had access to the route." "On what charge?" "Start with asking why they sent wagons into a killing ground." "That is not evidence of treason." "It is evidence that someone knew. It is evidence that someone may have known." Mira exhaled sharply. "You keep asking for certainty after the warning arrives." Dorian's eyes hardened. "And you keep asking a king to condemn men before proof? That is how people die. So is ruling by fear." For a moment, neither moved. Mira thought of Red Hollow. Adults whispering that help was coming. Signals no one understood until the gates were already marked. "You think waiting is neutral," she said. "It is not." "And you think action is always safer than restraint?" "It is not." She hated that he was not entirely wrong. That made the argument worse. The pressure inside Castle Vane changed after Westmere. By evening, two guards were posted outside the Royal Records corridor where there had been one that morning. A junior clerk carrying security schedules was stopped, searched, and sent back because his authorization had been changed without warning. Before supper, Mira watched Rowan tear up a movement roster and order a fresh one written by hand. That night, a kitchen runner was turned away from the upper stairs because yesterday's pass was no longer accepted. Even servants began whispering that the castle rules were changing faster than anyone could learn them. No one said the investigation had frightened someone. No one needed to. The castle felt like a room in which an unseen person had realized they were being watched. 2 days later, Mira found Dorian outside the records chamber. She had been sent to deliver fresh candles and had spent nearly an hour staring at the locked iron gate behind which the older campaign ledgers were kept. "I need access," she said. "To what?" "Hollow War campaign records, supply routes, gate reports, anything connected to the northern packs." "You cannot enter the restricted archive." "Because I am a servant." "Because you are an unranked civilian." Different words. Different law. She folded her arms. "If the answer is behind that door, rank should not matter." "It matters when those records contain troop positions, old codes, and names of informants whose families are still alive." "Then let me see what concerns Red Hollow." "I will request lawful access." "How long?" "I do not know." Mira gave a humorless laugh. "Of course." Dorian's expression cooled. "You would prefer I open every protected archive because you asked?" "No, I would prefer the process to move faster than whoever is doing this." That stopped him. Mira held his chaza. "The people who prepared Westmere already knew our schedule. They are not waiting for permission." Dorian said nothing for a moment. Then quieter. "Neither am I." The archive remained closed that day. It opened the next. Not fully. A records officer carried selected campaign ledgers into a reading room while Rowan remained present. Mira was allowed to review only material connected to the fallen northern packs. It was more access than she had possessed yesterday and less than she wanted. For now, she accepted it. She opened the first ledger. Names, dates, supply columns, casualty numbers. Then she turned another page. Her hand stopped. At the top of a relief report in faded black ink were two locations she knew better than she wanted to: Crown City, Red Hollow. Below them, Commanding Officer, Dorian Vane. Mira read the line twice. The room seemed to narrow around her. Behind her, the door opened. Dorian stepped inside. Mira looked up at him. For the first time since coming to Castle Vane, she did not see the king who had hired her. She saw the man who had commanded the army that came too late. Mira did not ask him to sit. Dorian closed the reading room door behind him and stopped when he saw which ledger lay open beneath her hands. Mira looked back at the page. Crown City, she said. Red Hollow. Yes. You commanded the relief force. Yes. The calm answer made it worse. Mira turned another page. Casualty estimates had been written in narrow columns beside supply figures and cavalry numbers, lives compressed into ink small enough to fit beneath a date. How many people were in Crown City? Just over 7,000 civilians by the final count. And Red Hollow? Fewer than 800. Her fingers tightened against the edge of the ledger. There were not enough riders for both. No. Did someone order you to choose Crown City? Dorian's face did not change. No. Mira looked at him. Then you chose. Yes. No excuse followed. No claim that there had been no choice. That honesty cut deeper than defense would have. My mother died there. I know. Her breath caught. You know? I reviewed the casualty rolls after the war. That is not the same as knowing her. No. Mira pushed away from the table. All this time I thought the army came late. We did. You did not come late. You went somewhere else first. Dorian accepted that without flinching. Crown City had thousands trapped behind a failing eastern wall. Red Hollow had one road in and one road out. I had enough cavalry to reinforce one position before nightfall. So you counted. Yes. And we lost. His jaw tightened. Yes. The old anger inside her had belonged to distant banners and hoofbeats arriving after smoke covered the valley. Now it had amber eyes. A knock sounded at the door. Rowan entered only far enough to speak. Security requests from the lower ward are being delayed again. 2 officers are insisting every movement order be reauthorized before release. Dorian's expression hardened. By whose instruction? They cite procedure. Nothing more. And the inquiry into who has been asking what Mira told us? Still open. Mira looked between them. Someone inside the castle was not merely hiding. Someone was buying time. Dorian noticed the realization on her face. Rowan, tighten access around the upper corridors. Mira's head snapped toward him. No. Both men looked at her. Do not turn me into something that needs to be locked away because your investigation is making someone nervous. I am not locking you away. You are about to decide where I can walk without asking me? Dorian went still. Rowan, wisely, said nothing. After a beat, Dorian said, Then we discuss it before anything changes. It was not agreement, but it was different from command. Rowan left. Mira looked back at the ledger. What else is there? Dorian stepped to the table and pulled a sealed packet from beneath his cloak. I ordered every Red Hollow record still held in the Royal Archive brought out for review. He placed the packet before her. This is all of it. Not a summary, not selected pages. Original dispatch copies, casualty projections, cavalry reports, weather notes, supply records, and orders bearing his own signature. Mira looked up. You are giving me everything? You should not have to trust my version of the worst decision I ever made. Some part of her anger shifted, not softened, shifted. He was handing her the means to judge him. Nothing in the packet protected him from that judgment. Mira opened the packet. Dorian did not stand over her shoulder. He moved to the window and waited. She read, Crown City wall failure expected before dusk. Red Hollow relief delayed. Northern Road reported impassable. She stopped. Read it again. River ford obstructed by ice and fallen timber. Cavalry passage impossible. Dorian turned. What? Mira traced the line with one finger. This is wrong. He came closer. How can you know that? Because I crossed that ford. The room went silent. Mira could see it again. Black water rushing around her knees, thin ice clinging to the banks, children tied together by strips of cloth so no one would be swept away alone. There was ice along the edges, she said, but the ford was open. No fallen timber blocked it. We crossed on foot that morning. This report was filed that same afternoon. Mira checked the weather notation beneath it. Temperature above freezing by midday. No storm, no heavy snowfall. Dorian took the dispatch and read it again. For cavalry, the crossing would have been dangerous, but not impossible, and certainly not sealed beneath the obstruction described in the report. A false report would not erase the choice Dorian had made, but it changed the ground beneath it. Mira looked at him. You were told the road could not be used. Yes, and you believed it. I had no reason not to. That does not change who died. His eyes met hers. I know. She wanted him to defend himself now, to seize this new possibility and use it to wash the blood from his own memory. He did not. That mattered more than she wanted it to. Mira closed the ledger slowly. So either someone filed a catastrophic mistake, or someone wanted Red Hollow left without relief. Outside the reading room, Boots moved quickly through the corridor. Somewhere below, a door slammed, and a guard called for a new authorization seal. The castle was tightening around them. Mira looked down at the false line on the page. For 12 years, she had believed Red Hollow died because help came too late. Now she wondered whether someone had made sure help never came at all. The castle grew quieter as its security tightened. Doors that had once stood open were locked before dusk. Servants showed badges twice to cross familiar corridors. Rowan reassigned guards without explanation, and Dorian was repeatedly pulled away by sealed messages. Mira noticed all of it. She also noticed what did not happen. No new restriction appeared on her movements without explanation. After the argument in the reading room, every change that affected her came through Rowan with a reason attached. It should have made things easier. Instead, she and Dorian barely spoke. 3 evenings after finding the false Red Hollow report, Mira finished her duties near the upper study and found him alone beside a dark window. You have been avoiding me, he said. So have you. I thought distance might be useful. For whom? His mouth tightened. That is a fair question. At the far end of the corridor, a guard checked a door and slid the bolt home. Somewhere below, another lock answered. The conspiracy remained unseen, but the castle had begun arranging itself around the possibility of violence. Mira looked through the window at the black pines. Do you still read the casualty rolls? Yes. Every year? Yes. Why? Dorian took his time. Because numbers become easier to forgive than names. She turned toward him. I did not want Red Hollow to become 800 people I once calculated against 7,000. There was no request for absolution in his voice. That made it possible for her to stay. I remember names too, Mira said. He waited. There were 11 children with me when we left the lower quarter. We used the drainage path behind the tannery because the road was watched. The youngest was 6. Tomas. He cried when the bells rang, So I told him they were only telling us which way to go. Her throat tightened. We reached the river after dark. We tied ourselves together with torn shirts so no one would be carried away alone. 8 of us reached the trees. Dorian lowered his gaze. And the 3? Lena, Thomas, Pater. She had not spoken those names aloud in years. I remember all 11, she said. But sometimes the 3 come first, and I hate that. Dorian moved one step nearer and stopped there. Then give the 8 room beside them. Not replace them. Not forgive herself. Simply make room. Mira looked at him. What do you remember? The moment I signed the order for Crown City. His gaze shifted to the dark glass. I believed it was the least terrible choice available. Then I read Red Hollow's casualty list and learned that least terrible still means someone carries the terrible part. For several breaths, there was no king and no witness between them. Only 2 people who had lived for years on opposite sides of the same decision. Mira crossed the space first. Dorian's eyes dropped briefly to her mouth, then returned to her face. Mira. It was a question. She answered by kissing him. His hand settled at her waist without pulling. The kiss deepened, and something unfamiliar moved beneath Mira's ribs. A brief, startling warmth, almost like her wolf lifting its head after a long sleep. She had felt a smaller echo of it once before, in Greyhaven, when Dorian's attention fixed on her across the hall. She had dismissed it then as fear. This was not fear. Dorian went still at the same instant, as if he had felt something too. Then he drew back, not far, but too quickly. Mira saw thought replace feeling in his face. What? Nothing. That was not nothing. He looked away. Information. The realization cooled her faster than the night air. What haven't you told me? Dorian's shoulders settled into the posture he used before saying something difficult. 2 days ago, I received a legal opinion concerning the sovereign neutrality clause. What opinion? If a personal bond between the king and an active crown witness is formally acknowledged during an investigation, that witness's standing can be challenged for royal influence. Mira stared at him. When were you going to tell me? I intended to wait until the investigation was complete. The hurt arrived clean and immediate. You decided that. I was trying to protect your testimony. No. Mira, you decided for me. If a bond between us became public, everything you have said could be attacked as something I wanted you to say. And you thought the answer was to keep me ignorant? I thought delaying the question would protect your standing. You thought you knew which risk I should take. Dorian stopped. Mira stepped away from him. You keep calling it protection when what you mean is control. He could have argued the distinction. He did not. That silence was answer enough. I want another room. His head lifted. Not in the royal wing. Anything connected to the investigation goes through Rowan. No private meetings. Mira. And no more of this. She gestured once between them. Dorian had more authority than anyone in the castle. For a moment, she saw how easily he could use it. He did not. All right. That almost hurt more. Mira turned toward the stairs, then stopped. I needed you to trust me with my own life. I know. She left before he could say anything else. Behind her, another security door locked into place. Dorian could fight an enemy, challenge a council, command soldiers. None of those powers could repair what he had just broken by deciding again that he knew which truth Mira could bear. For the first time, the greatest threat to whatever had begun between them was not the war returning outside the walls. It was the way Dorian carried power inside them. The accusation came 4 days after Mira moved out of the royal wing. By then, she and Dorian spoke only when necessary and never alone. Rowan handled every question connected to the investigation. Mira returned to her upper household duties, carrying linen, replacing candles, and moving through a castle where guards now checked doors more often than servants opened them. The distance had been her choice. That did not make it painless. She was carrying fresh towels toward the eastern guest rooms when Rowan found her. His face told her before he spoke, "You need to come with me." "Why?" "A letter was found in the old storage room beneath the west stairs." Mira waited. "It has your name on it." The council chamber was already full when she entered. Dorian stood at the head of the table, but he did not come toward her. Garrick Vane sat 3 seats down among the senior counselors, composed as ever. Evan Mercer stood near the rear wall, pale and uncomfortable, apparently summoned from Greyhaven. A folded sheet of paper lay in the center of the table. One of the counselors lifted it. This was recovered behind a loose stone in a room accessible from the servants' passage. Mira said nothing. The letter contains coded references to the Western Gate, convoy movement, and northern rebel positions. It is signed with your initials. Then someone wanted it found. A few faces hardened. The counselor continued. Several phrases correspond to signals you described during Crown questioning. There it was. Not proof that she had written it, but enough to make the room look at her differently. Mira's gaze moved to Dorian. He gave her nothing. She could use no reassurance, no silent promise. Perhaps that was exactly what respect looked like. "May I see it?" she asked. The counselor hesitated. Rowan said, "She is the accused. Let her examine the evidence." The letter was placed before her. Mira read it once. Then again. Something was wrong. Not with the handwriting. She had never seen it before. With the code, the third line used 2 short marks beside a crescent to indicate an open eastern route. Mira stared at it. "This is wrong." Garrick finally spoke. "Convenient." She ignored him. "The code is wrong." A counselor leaned forward. "Explain." In the first year of the Hollow War, 2 marks beside the crescent meant open passage. By the second winter, enemy scouts had learned it. Survivors stopped using it. How? We reversed the meaning. After that, the same mark meant watched road. The counselor looked at the letter. "And this version?" "The old one." "Could you be lying?" "Yes." The answer startled them. Mira lifted her eyes. "So check the archive. The version written here is the one preserved in official field manuals. It is not the version people actually used near the end of the war." Silence moved through the room. The letter had not become harmless, but it had changed. Whoever wrote it knew the war from records. Not from Mira. Another counselor turned toward Dorian. "Even if the letter is forged, the question of influence remains. She has been kept unusually close to the crown since arriving here." Mira's stomach tightened. Here it was again. Not whether she was telling the truth. Whether her truth belonged to her once the king cared about her. "The witness's standing has already been challenged," another said. "Until the letter is verified, detention is reasonable." A clerk stepped forward. Mira knew the procedure before he spoke. "Remove your household badge." She unpinned the pewter insignia and placed it on the table. "Kneel before judgment." For one brutal second, Greyhaven returned. Stone beneath her knees. Evan looking away. Dorian watching. Mira remained standing. The clerk's expression hardened. "You know the procedure." Across the room, Rowan moved closer to Dorian. His voice was low, but the chamber was quiet enough that Mira heard it. "If you invoke it, they review you with her." Dorian did not look at him. One of the senior alphas spoke more openly. "Your Majesty, once the royal stay is called, the crown itself becomes subject to judgment. You will surrender control of this inquiry until review is complete." Now Dorian looked at Mira. She did not ask him to save her, did not nod, did not give him permission to make another decision in her name. For a moment Mira thought that might stop him. Then she understood the difference. He was not deciding whether she was innocent. He was deciding whether a process he no longer trusted should be allowed to condemn her before the evidence was tested. Dorian turned to the council. Then review the crown. The room went completely still. I invoke the royal stay. No one moved for several heartbeats. Then the clerk who had ordered Mira to kneel slowly stepped back. Another official opened a narrow black case and removed the formal seal used to begin crown review. Dorian watched it placed on the table between them. He had not found a way around the law. He had placed himself inside it. Mira looked at him across the chamber. For the first time since she had left the royal wing, something inside her shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the king who had once watched her kneel had just chosen to stand under judgment beside her. The royal stay changed the room before anyone spoke again. A clerk crossed to the head of the council table and removed the black command insignia that had rested beside Dorian's seat since Mira first entered Castle Vane. Small enough to fit in one hand, iron-edged in silver, it carried the authority to direct emergency security without waiting for council approval. The clerk turned to Rowan. Until review is complete, command passes under council oversight. Rowan accepted the insignia. Dorian did not reach for it. Mira watched from the opposite side of the table. He had known this would happen when he invoked the stay. Now the cost had a shape. A senior Alpha opened the review record. His Majesty relinquishes chairmanship of the inquiry. He may not question Mira Calder privately, order the unilateral detention of a senior council member, or resume emergency command unless the stay is withdrawn. Withdrawn. The word landed heavily. Dorian could still end this. He could reclaim the insignia, restore his authority, and leave Mira to the ordinary treason process. He stepped away from the head of the table. Proceed. The room reorganized itself around that choice. Guards took orders from Rowan. Review officers received the documents first. Dorian remained Alpha King, but for this inquiry he no longer controlled the machinery around him. Rowan laid one thin packet on the table. This does not establish guilt, he said. It establishes reason to hold a man for questioning. He did not bury the council in ledgers. Restricted purchases connected to the recent gate work were routed through accounts attached to Lord Garrick Vane's office. One transfer was authorized with Lord Harrow's stolen seal before he reported it missing. The crescent and cuts on its back was not his mark. It had been scratched there afterward. The authorization trail leads to Quartermaster Halden. Garrick sat 3 seats away, composed. My office has dozens of quartermasters, which is why the records alone are not enough. Rowan turned. Evan Mercer. Evan stepped forward from the rear wall. He looked pale, but this time he did not look away from Mira. Rowan asked, At Greyhaven, before Lord Harrow's seal was found in Mira's apron, what did you see? Evan swallowed. A man leave Lord Harrow's table. He moved behind Mira and struck her shoulder as if by accident. Mira remembered the crowded hall, a body passing too close. Nothing unusual enough to hold. You saw his face? Rowan asked. Not clearly, but I saw his left hand when he steadied himself. The little finger was missing its tip. Rowan placed a personnel sheet beside the purchase record. Quartermaster Halden has the same injury. Evan continued, I thought he was drunk. Then the seal disappeared, and it was found on Mira. Mira understood the shape of it now. Halden had used Harrow's seal, marked it for whatever handoff his network intended, and dumped it into the nearest open pocket when Harrow noticed the theft sooner than expected. He had not chosen Mira because he knew her. He had chosen a servant because servants were supposed to be disposable. Her recognition of the mark had ruined that assumption. Rowan looked at Garrick. Halden serves your office. His authorizations connect to the restricted purchases. He disappeared yesterday. Garrick's expression altered by the smallest degree. Not panic, Calculation. Rowan faced the presiding Alpha. I request authority to hold Lord Garrick for questioning. Garrick leaned back. Because one subordinate may have stolen a seal and a nervous young man remembers a damaged finger? Because those facts now sit beside purchases tied to sabotage security, Rowan said. Probable cause, not conviction. Dorian watched the exchange in silence. Under ordinary emergency authority, he could have ordered Garrick held immediately. The command insignia in Rowan's hand made that impossible. The presiding Alpha looked down at the packet. A bell sounded before he could rule. Once, then twice in rapid succession. 3 bells. Mira's blood went cold. Not because of the sound alone, because of the room. Nearly every major Alpha in Castle Vane was gathered here. The Crown's command structure had just been altered. Senior guards had been pulled toward the review chamber. Someone had waited for the exact moment authority became slower. Seal the inner passages, Mira said. A guard looked instinctively toward Dorian. Dorian did not answer for Rowan. Rowan did. Do it. The guard ran. Garrick rose. Too quickly. Rowan's sword came free. Sit down. A heavy impact shook the corridor. Then another. Shouts erupted beyond the chamber. One side door slammed as a security bar dropped into place. The presiding Alpha stood. What is happening? Mira listened. Boots. Running toward them. Smoke began slipping beneath the western door. She looked at Garrick. His face had gone still again. He does not need to win the hearing. Rowan turned to her. What? Another crash sounded below, followed by metal grinding against metal. Mira saw the pattern with terrible clarity. He only needed every Alpha who could oppose him in one room. A guard burst through the remaining open door with blood on his temple. Commandermen in quartermaster uniforms attacked the lower watch. The service gate is compromised. Rowan began issuing orders. Garrick took one step toward the confusion. Rowan's blade crossed his path. For the first time, Garrick smiled. Not like a man falsely accused. Like a man whose clock had reached the appointed hour. From somewhere beneath Castle Vane came the groan of a gate mechanism beginning to move. Mira knew that sound. She had heard it once before while a city died. This time, she intended to reach the gate before death did. The first scream came from the western corridor. Every armed man in the council chamber turned toward it. Fire! Someone shouted beyond the doors. Rowan moved first. 2 men with me, the rest hold this room. Mira caught his sleeve. No. Smoke thickened beneath the western door. Instinct told everyone to run toward it. That was why Mira knew they should not. At Red Hollow, they set fire where they wanted the guards looking. If the fire were the attack, they would not have rung the siege signal first. She pointed toward the service passage. They want the guard line emptied somewhere else. Rowan hesitated for less than a second, then changed the order. Hold the inner corridor. No one abandons the service gate. He turned to Dorian. Your Majesty, keep the rear line here until the chamber is cleared. Under any other circumstance, Dorian would have been giving that order. Now he drew his sword and nodded. The first attackers reached the service gate moments later, wearing quartermaster uniforms. Royal guards met them before they could force the inner latch. Had Rowan sent those men toward the fire, the gate would already have been open. But the council chamber was still a trap. The main doors shuddered under a heavy impact. Several older Alphas drew weapons. 2 officers were bleeding, and servants pressed against the wall with nowhere to go. Mira knew another way out. The pantry passage. There is a servant stair behind the north tapestry. It comes out beyond the council wing. How many can it take? Rowan asked. Single file. Move them. Dorian and the remaining guards formed a rear line at the splintering doors, while Mira tore the tapestry aside and found the narrow panel used for coal and linens. Wounded first. A ranked wolf stared at the opening. You expect us to crawl through a servant tunnel? Mira glanced at the buckling door. You may stay, if dignity matters more. He entered first. Mira counted as servants, wounded officers, and council elders disappeared into the passage. 9, 14, 21. The numbers steadied her as they had when she was 12. No one lost because no one remembered to count. When the last elder passed through, Rowan remained with the fighting line, and Dorian held the rear beside him. Go, Rowan told her. Mira went. Halfway through the pantry corridor, the bells changed. 1 short strike. 2 fast. Secondary opening. The attackers had failed at the service gate. They were moving to the inner eastern gate. If it opened, men waiting outside could flood the castle. Mira turned. A kitchen boy nearly collided with her. Keep moving. Do not follow me. She took the servant's stair 2 steps at a time. The eastern mechanism sat below the armory in a maintenance room she had cleaned during her first week at Castle Vane. 1 guard lay unconscious beside the wall. The mechanism was already turning. Mira seized the iron service hook used to lift chain housings. She could not stop the wheel with her hands, so she drove the hook between 2 gear teeth and threw her weight against it. Metal screamed. The hook bent. The wheel stopped. Below, the inner gate froze halfway open. Not enough for mounted men. Not enough for a mass entry. The enemy outside could no longer join the men already inside. Mira staggered back, palms burning. A voice came from the doorway. You. Lord Garrick Vane stood there with blood on one sleeve and a sword in his hand. Recognition came slowly. Red Hollow. You remember me? A little courier girl, Garrick said, always running between the lower houses. He stepped inside. You were supposed to die with the others. Mira tightened her grip on the bent hook. You counted wrong. He moved. Mira ran not blindly, but down the maintenance corridor, through the linen turn toward the old counterweight passage she had used carrying supplies. Garrick followed. Running again? Exactly. Mira ducked beneath the raised iron barrier and seized the release chain. Garrick came after her. He understood 1 second too late. The barrier crashed down between them. Garrick slammed into the iron lattice. Trapped, separated from the eastern gate, his men, and his escape route. Footsteps thundered behind Mira. Rowan's guards. One caught her when her knees weakened. Where is he? She pointed through the barrier. There. Farther down the corridor, another guard shouted from a coordination room. They found gate maps, assault schedules, pay lists, a prepared proclamation blaming northern rebels, and a list of council alphas marked for death. The plan was plain without a confession. Kill enough pack leaders in one chamber, blame the North, and let panic create a war that would leave the surviving government desperate for emergency control. The documents proved who had built the siege. Mira had already broken it. The Alpha leaders were alive. The service gate had held. The eastern gate was jammed. Garrick had nowhere left to go. Only then did Dorian arrive with the remaining defenders from the council wing. His eyes found Mira immediately. He took 1 step toward her and stopped. Rowan still wore the command insignia. Is the hall secure? Dorian asked. The council is clear. Both gates are holding. Only then did Dorian cross to Mira. He did not reclaim command or ask why she had entered danger. His eyes dropped to her burned palms and the bent hook. What did you do? Mira leaned against the wall, breathing hard. What I learned the first time. Behind the barrier, Garrick struck the iron once in fury. Mira did not turn. 12 years ago, she had survived a siege someone else designed. Tonight, she had made sure his second one failed. 3 days after the siege, the great hall still smelled faintly of smoke beneath fresh pine resin. The broken doors had been repaired. Garrick Vane waited under guard in the lower tower while Rowan's men cataloged the plans recovered from his coordination room. None of that was why the Alphas had assembled. Dorian stood before the council table without the emergency command insignia. It rested inside a black case between him and the senior Alpha presiding over the Crown Review. Mira stood near the side wall with Rowan, her palms bandaged. The royal stay was invoked with sufficient cause, the senior Alpha said. Mira Calder was framed. The Crown did not conceal evidence or manufacture testimony. A murmur moved through the hall. However, the review found that emergency authority concentrated solely in the Crown created vulnerabilities during the inquiry. Going forward, a portion of that authority will require joint approval from the Alpha Council. Mira watched Dorian. That power was not ceremonial. He had used it to move armies, close borders, and make decisions while other men were still arguing over maps. It had helped him hold the kingdom together after the Hollow War. The senior Alpha rested one hand beside the black case. The Crown may contest the ruling. Dorian's fingers touched the table. If I do, a full proceeding. The limitation remains suspended until judgment. Given the evidence against Garrick, the Crown would have a substantial argument for retaining its existing authority. He could fight this, and he might win. Dorian looked at the insignia. For several seconds, he did nothing. Mira saw the cost in that hesitation. He believed in decisive authority because he had lived through the price of decisions made too slowly. Giving part of it away meant accepting that one day a council might delay him when he was right. His hand moved toward the case, stopped, then fell to his side. The Crown will not contest. Several Alphas shifted. The presiding Alpha studied him. You understand the limitation becomes permanent unless changed by future council agreement. I understand. The case closed. Dorian signed the ruling and stood while the command insignia was carried away from the crown table. Only then did he look at Mira. He had not surrendered power to win her back. He had accepted a limit because he no longer believed being king should mean being the only person allowed to decide when the rules could bend. The reforms that followed were quieter. Rules that had let rank outweigh testimony and humiliation precede investigation were placed under review. Mira agreed to advise the representatives doing the work and refused every suggestion that Castlevane simply create an exception for her. An exception would help one woman. She wanted the next maid to need no king in the room before anyone listened. A week later, Dorian found her on the western wall at sunset. Garrick will stand trial before winter, Mira said. He will. Then that belongs to the court now. Dorian stopped beside her, leaving space between them. I owe you an apology. You owe me more than one. A brief smile touched his mouth. Yes, but I do not need another apology tonight. What do you need? The truth. She looked over the forest. Tell me what happens when this becomes difficult again. Dorian understood. I cannot promise the kingdom will never ask something of me that hurts us. I would not believe you if you did. I cannot promise I will always agree with you. Good. But I can promise I will never again decide what you are permitted to know because I think I understand your life better than you do. Mira turned to him. There was the answer she had needed. Not safety, not obedience, not a king choosing her above every other life in his care. Choice. Then do not promise to protect me from every consequence. Dorian waited. Promise me I get to choose which consequences are mine. You do. No hesitation. He looked at her for a moment longer. There is one thing I should have told you sooner. What happened when we kissed the pull you felt? Mira remembered the strange warmth beneath her ribs, her wolf suddenly alert, and Dorian going still at the same instant. I felt a smaller echo at Greyhaven, she said. I thought it was fear. It was the beginning of a mate bond. Dorian did not move closer. A bond is not consent, and it is not a command. No, Mira stepped into the space he had left. This is. She kissed him first. Months later, Mira still used the servants' corridors because they led to kitchens, stables, laundries, and guard posts, the places where people noticed danger before councils gave it names. She helped build a civilian warning network from those voices. One evening, Dorian found her beside an open window overlooking the courtyard. 3 bells rang. Mira went still. Once that sound had meant smoke, running feet, and gates opening to death. Dorian did not ask whether she was all right. He simply stood beside her until the final echo faded. Then he asked, "What do they mean tonight?" Mira listened. Pans clattered below. Someone laughed. A stable boy shouted that supper was getting cold. She leaned lightly against Dorian's shoulder. "Dinner." He smiled. Mira listened to the castle continue living. "Tonight," she said, "they're only bells."